Welcome to the Soul Deep Podcast with Jessica Janty. Join me as we dive deep into raw, real, in-depth conversations about life, love, relationships, sexuality, spirituality, what it is we're really here for, and anything in between. I want this to feel like a safe space for anyone on a spiritual journey, trying to find answers in your truth by having open heart and open-minded conversations. And my hope for you as a listener is that you feel this is a safe space here, a place to hear things from a different perspective that may challenge you and your thinking in the best way possible, allowing you to give grace to how you've been raised or what you've been taught or told to believe. And perhaps you find your truth as I search for mine on this journey we call life. So grab your favorite drink, cozy on up to your couch or wherever you listen from, and join me for these soul deep conversations. All right, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here for this episode. Today I have with me Candace, and Candace and I actually just met, gosh, it was probably only not even maybe a month ago. Is it a month ago? Something like that. Yeah. And so I'm really excited to have you on here. Before we go too far, I love to open up with some breath. So if you are okay closing down your eyes, if you viewers or listeners are okay with closing down your eyes, we will just take a moment to settle in here. So if you would like to follow along and taking some breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth, and just continuing that cycle of breath, that inhale and exhale, really allowing no beginning and no ending, not holding at the top or the bottom, just letting your breath flow, putting intention to your breath. And as we take this power of the pause to really sit and be with our breath and be with our body, this does a number of things. One, it slows down our body of the constant busyness, the going, the doing. It just allows us into the being. It also gives our body this permission to take a pause. In our busy lives, also with the going and the doing, we don't often give ourselves this permission to just sit, to just be, to just breathe. And it truly is one of the most important things that we can do. It's so helpful for our mental well-being, our physical well-being. By slowing down, we can reduce our blood pressure, we can reduce our stress levels. It helps our nervous system. We're also building this capacity within ourselves to learn how to sit with the stillness, learn how to sit with the pause. Our body is so used to going and doing that just in the being sometimes feels scary. So if we can take these little moments, even if it's just 2 minutes, to breathe, to be with our body, we're letting our body know that it's safe. We're allowing our body to build this capacity for being still, and encouraging you to build this in yourself at home as a practice. Maybe just starting with 30 seconds, building it up to 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, whatever goal you have for yourself, to just give yourself this time and space. So just taking a couple more breaths here together. Our next big, deep inhale in. Maybe taking a big audible exhale. Our exhales are so powerful for letting go, maybe of stuck and stagnant energy, something that's sitting in our body that we just need to let go of. So it's so powerful. Even if you end it with an audible, like, just really helps our. Just coming back here whenever you're ready. If you breathe and you just want to be in your process for a moment, feel free to stay there as well. All right. Thank you for doing that with me.
Yeah, felt good.
Um, so I know you're just drinking water because we talked about this beforehand, but I love talking about what we're drinking. So you have your water, I have some tea. I'm coming off of a week of losing my voice. My throat is still a little scratchy. So I've just been downing tea with some honey, and it just feels wonderful. I just love warm drinks, especially this time of year.
I
I
was
mean,
just
I
gonna
don't
say
know.
that.
You're not in a super, where are you? You're
I'm
Canada.
in the Virginia Beach area, and but it's like going from 55 to 80.
Yeah.
So it's hit or miss. Today's like a little chilly, so I've got my sweater on, but it's a confusing time of year.
I mean, we can be in the 30s and then we can be in the 60s. So it's
Yeah.
same where it's just like you don't know exactly what to wear and how to dress.
Mhm.
All right. So if you would love to introduce the viewers to who you are and just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Candace West, and I would like to say that I'm a safe haven for women to come home to self. Retired Navy nurse of 22 years, a highly trained, accredited, and certified somatic and embodiment practitioner. I really work with all types of women, caretakers, nurses, healthcare field, veterans, really help them to close the loop by rewiring and reprogramming what's going on within the system, their lived experiences overall. So each of my clients look different, but that's what makes it so fun and exciting to be able to really just support women wherever they are in this now moment.
And you are also a mama, right?
I am. I'm a single mom and I have a 22-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 13-year-old. So yeah, fun times. I'm like, what do I do with these boys?
They're all boys.
No, no, my daughter's 22. Like
Okay.
that felt more natural being a female myself, but these boys, 13 and 16, like deep in puberty and all the things. I'm like, what am I doing?
Yes, mine's 16. And so it is. It's like they want to be in their own little space and do their own thing, but then you're also like, wait, I still want to be with you. And how do I be with you and connect with you at this age and the stage? And yeah,
I know all the things. Like what I do love though is he brings them, my 16-year-old, he brings them all here. So I mean, just this Saturday, I had like 8 basketball players here and they were just up doing their thing, which, it shows me that, okay, this is a safe place if he's bringing them all here. But I would be lying if it's not beneficial for me in that, like, I get all the tea and I'm learning all of the language and the terminology and the slang for them. So I'm like, okay,
yeah.
so I can stay in the know. Yeah.
My daughter was better at bringing her friends around. My son, he has a friend who they love to be at his house. I mean, they will come here too, but not as much as my daughter's friends did. And I do miss that because I'm like, oh,
I
I loved
know.
having them here all the time, and now it's not as much, and now she's out of the house, and so now I just have one
Yeah,
here, and so it's just such a different time.
it
Yeah.
is. But I'm learning. So I'm like, okay, all right, let's go with it.
Okay, so there's a couple things that you said. So Navy nurse, can you tell me a little bit about that? Because, well, first, how did you get into the Navy? And then how did you choose to be a nurse in the Navy? Or was the nurse first and then the Navy? How'd that go?
No, I didn't know what I was doing. So I've been in the healthcare field since I was 15. I worked as a certified nursing assistant since high school. And as I share in the beginning of my book, like I was just in this rut. I was in a relationship, didn't feel aligned. I was, felt very abandoned by my parents and my caregivers and just been told I was going to fail essentially at everything and just become, nothing. And I thought, well, gosh, I don't want to stay in this small cornfield hick town that I currently was in. And it was Christmas, and my fiance at the time, his sister came into town and she was sharing all of these benefits of the military. And I'm like, what? Like, who would not sign up for this gig? Insurance, like housing allowance, job security, training, college, and, being service of others is something that I've always really been um, called to do. So I'm like, this makes sense, duh. And I like joined the military and was shipped off to boot camp, what felt like, I don't know, just a few months later. So That's how it started. I joined as a hospital corpsman, which is, we're really unique in what we do because we offer, I mean, they're the ones out on the combat, the boots on the ground, taking care of the Marines, but yet in a hospital setting in the States, you've got a limited cap on what you can do. I'd like to say there's equivalent to LPNs. I think that's like the best way to put it without getting too technical. And so I did that for several years, maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6. And then I put in for a program to get my nursing degree for the military to kind of help cover that. And so I was selected my first time up, and I went to Norfolk State here in Virginia and got my bachelor's, and then got my commissioning, and then served the rest of the time. So from 2009 till I retired in 2022, I was a nurse. Yeah. And that looked like all sorts of things. I mean, I worked in postpartum, I did pediatrics, I did adult health, I did administrative work, and then I went off and got my master's. They sent me and got my master's as an advanced practice registered nurse. There, as a clinical nurse specialist, it's really us looking at the organization from like this 50,000-foot view, looking at systems and processes, and really being able to dissect things using evidence-based practice. So it's really been a beautiful blend because I use all of that knowledge now from a body system angle, coupled with the holistic knowledge that I have to be able to look at the body from a whole like lens perspective. So really interesting how all of this has evolved.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. So one of my best friends from growing up went into the Navy right after high school. And I remember her story because she had her son, her first child, while she was in the Navy. And I just remember hearing her story because I had already had my daughter by this point. They're like a year apart. And I remember hearing her story and it sounded horrible. And so when you said postpartum nurse, I was like, I wonder if you were in the hospital itself, and you had to help women right when they came out of recovery. Because I think she ended up having a C-section.
Yeah. I usually got them after so that was more like L&D,
Mm-hmm.
where they helped them through all of that. And that was actually my desire where I wanted to go. And they put me in postpartum, which I'm like, okay, I'll take it. It's still babies. I loved it. I really, really loved it. And I was there as the corpsman, but then as I got my nursing, they wanted to put me back there. And I'm like, no, no, no. Like it was literally the same floor that I worked on as a hospital corpsman. And like some of the nurses were still there. And I'm like, no, they're going to remember me as this person.
Yeah.
This person, I needed a completely different experience. So yeah. Yeah.
And then, so you said fiance at the time. So, what did your fiance, how did that all work out when you're like, okay, I see you later. I'm going into the Navy. See you later.
He's like, I'm going to join and come with you. He
Really?
did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he did. And it was really funny because I was kind of running from him because I didn't feel aligned. And there's so much in the book that like dissects all of that. But then he joined and I'm like, oh, guess it's meant to be, right?
Sure.
I guess we're meant to like run off and get married and do life together and live happily ever after. So yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, so now backing up even a little bit more, when you talked about what you do and who you are, you talked about somatics and embodiment practitioner. So now if someone is listening here for the first time, I know what those words mean and you know what those words mean, but how would you describe that to somebody that had no idea?
Ooh, I'm going to take some out of Andy Love's definition here because she just explains it so well and it lands. So, somatics, the root of that word is soma, being with the body. So really, I help guide people back to their body, so we can decode the sensations and feelings that they have within. And so that piece, the actual art of doing that, that's the embodiment piece. So really just connecting people back to their sacred vessels instead of bypassing what is happening within, so they can just listen to the wisdom, because our body is constantly trying to communicate to us, whether it's through movement or foods that we need to eat to nourish self, whether we need tea, whether we need to drink water. But we are so much on the go, the next, because unfortunately, like that's just how life has a grip and a hold of us right now and for such a long time. So taking the time to sit and be with our our self. And I look at self as like kind of we did in the summit, self is that sacred vessel, E is the embodiment, L is that love, and F is that fierceness. So being able to sit with self and really be able to understand what's happening and giving ourselves permission to take aligned action, however that looks. So that's how I would just in a snapshot talk about somatics and embodiment.
Yeah, you summed that up very beautifully. And I love that you brought in Andy too,
Oh
because
my God.
I just started her rooted program.
As she
So,
says, buckle up, girl.
oh,
It's
I'm
so
so
good.
excited. I'm so excited. So I've done breath work. So I've got that piece of like the body awareness, bringing and knowing the body's wisdom and all of that. And it's so beautiful. But I know that there's more that I need to learn. And I know that and I do know, I mean, because obviously being nurses, we know about the body, we know about the nervous system, but you're not taught to this depth
Mm-mm.
that she goes. And so I'm really excited about that and about really learning and then tracking myself, which is something that I haven't gotten great at and I need to be better at it. Because we're like 2 weeks in and I haven't tracked. I think I've done a day here and a day there. And yeah. Yeah.
You've got plenty of
Yes,
time.
yes. But
Well,
I'm excited for it.
and I think too, like you hit on the fact that we're both nurses, and that's where I feel like that adds a level of differentiation from us and others, is because we have a full understanding of the pathophysiology of the body, the hormones, the system, the connection with gut and brain. Like we get that at that level. So being able to hear someone say, "Oh my gosh, like I've got this autoimmune disorder disease." Great, we know. And then it's also like peeling that back. It's like, okay, and let's dig in. What does this look like? What does this lab look like? Okay, what does your stress look like? Oh, well, did you know that chronic stress narrows that window of tolerance, which then leaves you in that sympathetic state longer. And then depending on the window of tolerance or the flow zone, as she says, pushes you down into that polyvagal, right? The dorsal vagal. And so just having this understanding of like that language of how the body works and operates, we are able to, I feel like we're able to break it down in a way that people can understand from also a holistic angle, to be able to see that all of this stuff really is stacked upon one another over time. And it all goes back to all of the things that we are avoiding, disassociating from, the loops that aren't closed from childhood or even things that happened, 5 years ago. And so I think we really have an advantage as healthcare trained, to be able to take it even a step further to help others understand what's going on within.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Absolutely. And I also feel at times there are, especially when I went through my breath work and things, I was like, why were we not? And the nutrition piece, now that I've been learning, I've been outside of the Western medicine model for about 3 years now. And I'm learning all these different ways that we can heal our body with different modalities and different, you don't have to take a pill the second you get sick. Like you could heal it through food. I could drink some tea and heal my body.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just so many things that you learn. And I was like, so I went through almost this period of anger for a little while after I left the hospital, just being like, why were we not taught this? Why were we not taught that food can heal, that our breath can heal? And I just remember being very angry and wanting nothing to do with the hospital, because when I became a nurse coach, I was like, I'm going to help all these nurses and I'm going to go back in the hospital, I'm going to try to help everybody. And then I got through this stage where I was like, I'm so angry at the hospital, like I want nothing to do with it. I don't want to go, I don't want to even step foot inside of a hospital. And so it was like this whole roller coaster of emotions of being like, okay, it is okay that we didn't learn it then, I'm learning it now, but yeah, I feel like it is broken in ways, and that's a whole another topic for another time. But
Well, I think it's interesting too that like we didn't know when we were working in the hospital, right? We didn't know until we knew. And so that's likely a lot of the experiences that others are having is like they don't know. And then we end up having some form of an awakening or some huge life altering thing that pushes us into discovering and learning more about this. And so we're woke to the fact of like, wait, what?
Mhm.
And we just see everyone around us still in that, And so I'm constantly trying to not force or push, but I would say educate like the masses of did you know? And at the end of the day, like those that come along, great. Those that don't, it's just not their time yet.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you said you were retired. So
Yeah.
retired by choice, or this is like you just ended, you were able to be done? Because I know a little bit about the military itself and as a whole, but only in that, like, I think you have to do 4 years at least when you sign up, and then
Yeah.
something
It's
like
so different for enlisted and officers, but for
that.
me, I chose to retire at 22 years. I don't want to say I'm old and salty. Just there are, I mean, they're doing better at improving some of the quality of life and some of the family related things. But one thing that has just re-traumatized me over and over and over again is their requirements for the standards. We have physical standards, which the working out piece I'm fine with. You know, the push-ups, the what is it? What do they do now? The planks, the running, the bikes. That's not a big deal. It's the body composition piece that I just cannot get in alignment with. So twice a year, and things may have changed since I've retired, but at the time I was in twice a year, depending on your height, you have to weigh a certain amount. And also if you exceed that number, then they do this series of taping to gain your body fat percentage. But for women, you know, where they're taping us where it's like, really, we have babies, you know, like the hip area, like we've had babies, the stomach, the waist, like it just, it, you know, pushed me into a lot of really poor behaviors that I share in my book. And honestly, like I'm at to my 2 year retirement. November 1st was my 2 year retirement. And I'm just now getting into a place where I'm comfortable moving. I call it moving, not exercise, not working out, but I don't wear like an Apple Watch or anything because seeing if I've not burned enough calories or etc. Like I don't really weigh myself because it re-triggers, Candace, you have to be 154 pounds. And just carrying that weight on a day in a day out basis, fearing at the time when I was in, if you failed these, you know, body assessment, then you were in jeopardy of being kicked out
Wow.
because it's like the needs of, you know, the service. And if you can't meet this requirement, well, you're not fit for full duty and you're not capable of completing the mission. And so like adios. And so as a single mom in the beginning with my first marriage not going the right way, um, I mean, it was just me being responsible for my daughter. And so I did everything that you can think of. And it really triggered a lot of the disordered eating. I was working out excessively just to lose the weight. And it just wasn't really a healthy place for me. And then as I got older, you know, I'm like, I'm teaching my kids this yo-yo behavior of like,
Yeah.
they'd watch us drastically cut back, our
Yeah.
diet would change. I'd be wrapping preparation H on my stomach with saran wrap to go run in hoodie out on my treadmill for an hour. It just was so unhealthy and so toxic. And I knew that they weren't changing, that that was always going to be a requirement.
Yeah.
And as I got older, like the weight is harder and harder, you know, to lose and keep off. And so I was doing it from a place of fear and lack and scarcity of like, I have to pass this. If I don't, they'll kick me out. I'll lose my retirement. And I'm like, this is not how, and my body was falling apart. You want to talk about metabolic dysfunction and adrenal fatigue. And so my metabolism is still trying to recover.
Yeah.
So you know, that amongst some other things, I was just like, I've outgrown this. This is no longer for me. I've served 22 years. I've given it my all and it's time to say goodbye. So
Yeah. How long do you have to be in until you get like your retirement? Is it like pension or whatever that's
20
called?
years
20
before you
years.
can
Okay.
get your pension.
Okay.
So I had already gone over and I'm like, why am I doing this? I love what I do and I love being of service to others, but I was no longer being of service to self. I was betraying myself, abandoning myself out of fear and wanting to pass a body composition, which am I really passing it when I'm doing all of these horrific things to my body is bizarre.
So you had all three babies then while you were in the
I did.
military. How was that having I mean, obviously, being a nurse, I'm assuming if you were working in the hospital type setting that I mean, I guess I don't want to assume anything. So how was it being pregnant while you were, in and serving?
Well, for all three kids, well, actually, I take that back. My first and my third, I was working 12-hour shifts, holiday weekends, floating every 6 weeks from night shift to day shift. So that was a load of fun. My body's like, what is happening? And then my second one, I was in my nursing program. And so I had a lot more freedom and autonomy. But I will say, like, hands down, my experiences were great. I had supportive chain of commands. I had like wonderful team-oriented coworkers and peers. I love the healthcare. Like, I was always so taken care of. My labor and delivery experiences were amazing. I mean, my kids, I don't know how many military people can say this, but literally all three of my kids were born in the same exact hospital. Two of them actually in the same exact room.
Oh,
And
wow.
they were such nightmare deliveries because my body was like on a agenda of its own. I was like, my third kid is not going in that room again. Like, I'm not doing that. I will say I love how the military has evolved in the time off, the convalescent leave and the paternity leave for men. That was not something that was there when I had my kids. I got 6 weeks off and then went right back to work. So had to get right back into working out because, again, right around the corner,
Ugh.
I got to weigh in. And yeah, it
No
was.
matter how far postpartum you were, it didn't matter. Like you had to be
Yeah, like at the time you got 6 months.
okay.
So when you get done, you get 6 months from that delivery time. So you have to be back to normal. But see, I breastfed, right? And so well, we all know it takes women's bodies like a year to go back. And then if you're breastfeeding, because of the oxytocin releasing when you're doing all of that, like even your hips and your core muscles, everything, it just takes a while.
Yeah.
And I remember after my second kiddo, I had him the end of September, and then I was still, pumping and all. He was tongue tied, so he couldn't attach. Um, but also single momming.
Mm.
Guys, just read my book if you have questions. And I go fast forward. I had to go off to my officer development school I think I left in June. And so technically, like, I shouldn't have had to do this physical fitness assessment and weigh in or anything like that because I was still within my window. But because I was going off to training, they're like, no, you have to be squared away. Like, forcing my body to lose the weight. I ended up getting micro tears in my stomach because I pushed myself so hard. It was just, I'm grateful the rules have changed. I'm glad they're coming on board with the reality of, like, this is not supporting women. Women should not have to choose between their career and having a family, and progressing their goals because of all of these other, like, limitations that were around us.
Mhm.
I'm really happy to see that that's changing now for people who are in.
Ah, okay. So I love to ask this question to everybody who's here. What do you think is your soul's purpose?
I am a walking permission slip.
Can you expand on
And
that? Yeah.
it's so funny because when I wrote like Permission Granted,
So that's the name of your book, right?
yeah, that's the
Oh,
name of the book, Permission Granted. And that wasn't going to be the title at all, even as it morphed into a memoir. That wasn't the title. And it kept coming and it kept coming. And I'm like, why? What? And it dawned on me, like, I started getting these like flashbacks of all of these different scenarios in my life where I have gone first. Because, sometimes we need to see someone go first, and then it almost gives us safety to like do the thing as well. And I remember in cross country, it was going into my senior year, I was team captain, and we went on this excursion. It was like this whole team bonding thing. And we went hiking and camping and did all of this. I look back and I'm like, man, all right, go ahead, Candace. We went hiking and we were up high on this cliff. And the guy we were with was like, hey guys, let's jump. And everybody, including myself, I'm like, I don't swim. That's a no for me. But part of me was like, no, I kind of want to do this, but I'm a little scared. And then I saw some of the others that also wanted to do it, but they were scared. So I was like, so they all start walking off and I'm like, what the hell? And I turned around, didn't give it a second thought, took a big deep breath and off I went. And I don't even know how high I was, but it was high. I remember I'm like, okay, anytime now I can hit the water on my way down. And then once I did that, a couple others came, and it just seemed to be like this pattern of just different things throughout my life that, like, once I did something,
yeah.
It's like others did it. And I never really made that correlation till deeper in the development of the book of like, this kind of has been what my life has kind of been like, where I just do something and then like other people will follow. And it's almost like, you just sometimes you need to see other people do it. And it kind of gives us that like confidence or the permission to be able to step in our own power. And that's kind of what I feel like I've been doing, especially the last handful of years, where I've been just like taking these leaps and going in uncharted territory where I feel like I've got a blindfold on, but yet I'm still doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And after writing my book and putting it out and getting the feedback that I got, it just affirmed to me like, yeah, like I'm to go first. My book exposes all of the horrible things I've done that were rooted in trauma unknowingly, right? Education, self-awareness. And so I felt like, especially after my husband left in March, I'm like, I cannot let people keep making the same mistakes that I've made and learning the lessons and having to feel the same pain. So like, let me share my story, full exposure, put it all out there, and let this be their permission slip to step forward in their healing, to become more self-aware so they don't have to learn. They can learn my lessons without having to feel the pain of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it is. And I talk about that sometimes because I create like women's circles, and it's that, like you said, that permission slip. Sometimes people come in and nobody wants to share. It gets a little, awkward there for a little bit. And then someone will go first. And then everybody else will be like, oh, okay, I can go too. So but it's having that first person to be able to go and like step out of their comfort zone and just say, okay, I'm going to show up and be a little vulnerable and go first. And that it can be very hard to do.
Mhm.
So what made you decide to write a, so let's talk about your book a little bit, because we've kind of talked like briefly here and there, but what made you decide to write a book?
Yeah. Well, I had a pelvic organ prolapse back in 2020. It was in 2018. I ended up having reconstructive surgery in 2020 before all the madness took place. I was overseas. They medevaced me to Hawaii. I had this whole like 10-hour robotic procedure, 13 incisions, drilled through my pelvic bone, just did all the things. And I was sitting in convalescent leave overseas, and it just like a Plinko chip just kerplunk, you should write a book. And I'm like, God, Candace, nobody wants to hear what you have to say. Yeah, I'm always told you talk too much, queen of TMI. Like, so it's one of the things, yeah, that I've carried is a belief of like, you're too much. And
Mm,
so I just let that go. And then when I started my 3-year coaching program in 2020, one of the things that we learned in 2022 was like the different ways that you can write a book, the traditional, just all the different ways. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to write a book, but I'll wait till I move to my next location because we were moving in like less than 6 months. And so that brought me to 2023 and we got settled. And I'm like, okay. So like October of 2023 is when I started writing. And I was like, I'm going to write a self-help book of my signature Bloom coaching methodology and write about my beautiful clients' transformations that they've had, just to show like we are all going through different things. And also they're very similar. I was deep in the writing, and then my husband left in March and I just started writing, just dumping so much other stuff about myself. And when I got picked up with the publishing company that I went with, they're like, I think there's more here. And so just in the discovery and self-reflection, I realized I was writing about everyone else's transformation. That way I could sit in shame and continue to punish myself for all of the things that I've done. So morphed into a memoir where I tell all.
that gave me goosebumps when you just said that, because it's so true. I think we're often so much, especially as women, and I'm sure there are men too who are listening or just out there, but we put so much into helping everyone else. I mean, even when I was sick this last week, and I noticed it a time before as well. It's like the second anybody else in my family is getting like a little sniffle, a little something, I'm like, okay, vitamin C, I'm going to make you some tea. I'm going to, we're going to get the diffuser set up in your room, and we're going to do all these things. And I'm getting all the stuff and all the tinctures and getting everything set out for everybody else. And then I get sick. And then I remember my husband being, it was like day 2 maybe of me being sick. And he's like, well, are you taking anything? And I was like, oh no. And he's like, well, why not? You're always like pushing us to take all this stuff the second we get sick. And then here you are, you're on day 2 and you haven't done a darn thing. And it's so interesting how we are constantly looking to help other people. And then what about ourselves? Like we get lost in that fixing and helping and doing for other people. And then we forget that we have to help ourselves first. It's like that airplane, when they tell you in the airplane, fix your oxygen mask first. I remember always thinking, well, that's dumb. Of course, I'm going to put my kids on first. And then when you really think about it, it's like, well, if I am sick, if I am not here, how can I help anybody else? I can't. I have to take care of myself first. It is so important. But to really like get that in your head and your body, not just in your head, because you have to feel it in your body for it to actually really come to fruition. And so this last time I really noticed like I was doing much better at that. I'm like, I have to take care of myself because I am just as important as everybody else. Because it's almost like you're not saying you're as important, or you're just not giving yourself that time and space, that importance.
Yep.
So when did this book come out? Because it was just pretty recent, right?
Yeah. So it launched on my 44th birthday, so September 23rd. Yeah, and within 24 hours, I mean, I don't talk about this enough, but my mentor was like, girl, you need to be sharing this more. It actually hit #1 bestseller in 4 different categories in like less than 24 hours, and hit #1 top new release in 5 categories as well. So I was, seeing my book above Gabby Bernstein's. I'm like, hey. I was owning that for a moment.
You should.
Letting that soak in. But I think, more importantly, it's the messages that I've gotten where it's like, me too. Me too. And I'm like, why are we suffering in silence? There are so many people in the military that had reached out that were like, girl, I had no idea. I was going through this too. And I'm like, if we would have known, we could have been like safe havens for each other and just not felt so alone. And man.
Because we're taught to suffer in silence.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Sit there and be quiet. You're being dramatic. You're being too sensitive. You're whining. Just sit there and be a good girl.
Yeah. I mean, I have a kind of a story to go along with that. So my grandma, my dad's mom, they literally labeled her a hypochondriac. And she had so many medical issues. She had a lot going on. I think truly what it was, if I could look back and reflect, she's no longer with us. She died at like 64, but she had so many medical issues going on. And I think it all stemmed back to postpartum depression. And she was never treated. They didn't know how to treat her, and back, what is it, 63 years ago? They didn't know how to treat that. You threw you in a mental institution until I don't really even know like how it went. But I think it just compounded after that. And then she was put on meds and then more meds. And you know how that works. When meds interact with each other and then you develop
pharmacy.
And like she was
I got this side effect and this side effect. So let's give you this and this. And
yes. And she was on so many medications. And I remember going into her apartment one time and trying to help her, because at this point I had just become a nurse. And so I'm trying to help her put all her pills together. And I'm like, she is on so many medications. There's like 20 some medicine bottles. And I'm like, how can somebody even know what you're taking? And how does the doctors even know that this is what she's supposed to be on? And she had like 10 different doctors that were giving her all these different medicines. I remember thinking, like, how do they even know that? Like, does this doctor know that this medicine?
Exactly.
Yeah, like
the side effects.
Nobody's looking at the whole being. They're looking at their little piece, saying like, okay, she's got this and she's got this, so I'm going to give her this and I'm going to give her this, but then nobody's talking. And so I really think she was just done a disservice. And it was, it breaks my heart, like thinking back and thinking about all the struggles that she had gone through and thinking about all the labels that she was given. And then what I was taught and told to believe about her is that she was crazy. And now I sit and think about it. I'm like, I really don't think that she was. I think she just didn't know what to do and she didn't have the help that she needed. And she was just medicated and over medicated to the point of sickness and illness and ultimately death. And so I don't even know where I started with that conversation, where we even actually started and how I got on this thing. But I think we're suffering in silence, I think, is basically kind of where we came around, and that we were just told to be quiet, take a pill. We don't talk about with our friends and with our, we just don't talk about medicines that you're on. We don't talk about going to the doctor, especially if there's mental health. I mean, that was a huge stigma in and of its own self. Going to therapy is definitely different now than what it was back then.
For sure.
Now it's like everybody's in therapy. It's okay to talk about being in therapy. We have our kids in school that see therapy. Like it's just so much more talked about. Still, I think our mental health system has a long way to go. But yeah, there's just so much behind all of that. And so if you're listening, biggest thing that I want you to take away from that is don't suffer in silence, because somebody else, like giving this permission slip for you talking first and talking with your friends or talking with your family, or finding someone to talk with about what you're going through, because somebody else may be going through it as well and they're just too afraid to talk about it. So it's that whole giving that permission slip again about you going first and having these conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So how did, maybe talk us through the process of, because I have no idea, a process of writing a book, of publishing a book, of getting it out there, of, how did you get to number one? Was it just that you had such a huge launch party that all these people knew that you were putting a book out? Or is it just that your book resonated so much with so many people that everybody is like I want to know all the things.
It's so funny that you say that, because I've got like my Instagram just hit like 403 followers. So it's definitely not like I have a huge following at all. Honestly, I feel like it's a combination of people wanting to support me and then people coming for the tea. I'm on my second divorce. I've got 3 baby daddies. People were coming for the tea, but come for the tea, stay for the healing. I don't care your birth, as long as you walk away with something tangible that puts you in taking intentional aligned action. Come for the tea, sister. I got another book I'm starting, so you can come for that tea too when it's ready. Yeah, no, like I just wrote, and I knew that with what I have been through in my life and all of my experiences, that I knew that it was going to dabble into, I mean, probably 99% of the female population. That, like, there's probably not one person that could grab my book and not feel like they resonate with an era in it. There's 22 eras. I mean, like seriously, like I've been through it all: domestic violence, like all the things, so between childhood and just my own lived experiences as an adult. But I think there's something to be said when we can reverse engineer and look at how I became this way. I didn't just wake up one day and I'm like, oh, this is how I'm going to be. Like, it was trauma stacked on trauma stacked on trauma. It was intergenerational trauma, projections of caregivers that made me have these beliefs about myself, which then, triggered my own thoughts, actions, and behaviors. And I coped in ways to make me feel, to have my needs met, to make me feel like safe. And they weren't, as we know, when you're surrounded by nothing but chaos, that's what feels safe. Chaos. So just imagine the disruption in my life and all the things. So I'm like, this needs to be out there. People need to see this. And if anything, if you can grab a hold of your own healing, just so you're not handing it over to your children, like.
Yeah. I mean, I opened up with that a little bit with our breath. It's like taking that power of the pause, taking, even if it's 2 minutes or 30 seconds, building that up in yourself, because our bodies are so wired like that. That's how we're born. We're brought into this world in chaos. Our parents didn't know how to be still. I mean, I grew up in a family where we owned a business, and it was lazy if you were sitting. You constantly had to go and be and do and all the things. We got cartoons Saturday mornings. I think we got to watch a couple cartoon episodes, sometimes maybe on Friday nights. We had to watch TGIF.
Yeah, I remember that.
Don't you? So good.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but we didn't have, at least when I first was growing up. Now, if you'd ask my sister, there's 4 of us and she's in the end, her experience is so different from mine. When I was how I learned was you had to keep going. You don't sit still. Sitting still is lazy. Then I went to I worked in the ICU for primarily part of my nursing career. And in
How'd
ICU,
that
you don't
land for
sit.
you?
You know, the second you sit down, if someone walks past you, they're like, oh, can you do this with me? Can you help me with this? So it's like, you
Mm-hmm.
don't get to sit. And if you sit, people think that you've just been sitting for 2 hours. Like when you've literally maybe just sat your butt in the chair and then someone's like, wait, you're sitting? Okay, can you come help me? Like there's so much going and doing that our bodies don't know that it's safe to just be. So it's building these muscles, it's building this capacity in our body to allow the safety in the stillness. But we have to build it. It's not just going to come.
Yeah.
I try to tell people it's like training for a marathon or, working out because you want to reach a certain goal weight or whatever it is. Like you're not going to get it in one session. It's like a continuous practice that you have to build up in yourself to allow that safety, because it's not just going to come overnight. Like we have to build that because we've been so conditioned that sitting still is lazy, sitting still is not safe. So,
It's
yeah.
funny that you say too, like, we're born into a world of chaos. If you think about the whole process of labor and
Mhm.
delivery, what is peaceful about that? Like, I get nowadays they're moving into that, but as soon as a baby comes out, they're getting a slap on the butt, there's monitors, there's beeping, there's pokes, there's pricks, there's shots, there's all the things.
Mhm.
Mom is trying to breastfeed, she's stressed out, baby can sense that. There's nothing calm about that process. So right out, like from jump, baby is in an environment of that sympathetic energy. I mean,
It makes me so sad for like when I think about that. I'm like,
Mhm.
now I would do things so different. Well, with what I know, oh my gosh, I would have
Oh,
this
so
amazing
much.
playlist and I would have people who could just like help me breathe and rub my back. And, I wouldn't have said I needed to do this alone and it can only be my husband and I. Like, I would have allowed support. I would have, probably tried to do it in my home. I would have, to bring this level of peace into our children's first moments. But, we can't go back and do it over. So we can only move forward and teach our children so that they can have these beautiful experiences that we weren't able to have. So I know that's why I'm doing a lot of my work is so that I can help my kids. And part of me sometimes feels like, man, I didn't learn this stuff fast enough. My kids are now, 18 and 16, and they don't necessarily really want to hear everything that I have to say. I'm not, at this point, I don't I don't have all the wisdom and knowledge. When they're in like, you know, from little on until maybe 13, 12, 13, you are like, everything. They want to hear everything you have to say. They soak it up like a sponge. And then the second, it's like 13, maybe 12, 13. It's like, I know better than you. I don't need your help. I can
I
figure out
know,
myself.
but they listen,
They
Jessica. They
do.
do.
Yes.
Like this last week,
Yes.
my son had his basketball tryouts, and the year before he didn't make it. We were at a different school in a different location. And so he, in his mind, like he was so worried about making it, and he injured his knee on day one of tryouts. So he was like all in the rut. And I'm like, listen, if we sit and we fixate on this injury, let's just nurse it. Let's take care of it. Like, let's give it the love and attention that it needs, and like let's think positive things. And I'm like not bypassing, but we're also in that awareness of if we fixate on what happened, we're just going to be stuck in that energy. So it was so funny. By like Wednesday, we were on the way to tryouts, and he had his little earbuds in, and he was listening to positive affirmation. He
Oh,
was listening to positive affirmations. I didn't even tell him to do it. I'm like, well, my conversation can wait. You go ahead and do your. I know. And he ended up making it. And it was like this whole entire thing. They all celebrated with that sleepover this weekend. But I'm like, 2 years ago, he wouldn't have. They're listening. And that's what I keep trying to like.
yes. And
They
I
look
know
annoyed,
that
they roll their eyes, but they're listening.
I know that's true because my daughter now lives outside of the home. And so she'll call me or message me like, okay, so what would be the healthier option to buy? If I want to eat better, or, what do you think about this? And I do also notice it in my son a little bit as well, too, because I call it senioritis, but he's still a junior, but he is like so over school and just going to school. And I'm like, listen, if you continue every day to wake up and say this is going to be a terrible miserable day, it's going to be a terrible miserable day. But if you think to yourself like, okay, I'm looking for I can do this, this will be a great day, it will be a great day. And so I just keep having this conversation over and over and over with him because I'm like, it will eventually sink in. And in the last few days, he hasn't said much. I mean, now obviously it was the weekend, but he didn't today say anything about it's going to be terrible. I don't want to go to school. And so I'm just hoping that, like, kicks
I
in.
think needs. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I know.
So one question I would love to ask you is, and just because I love to hear back on people's stories, but like, how does life look now? So let's say how you were raised, how you were brought up and told that life had to be, maybe it looked a certain way, or maybe you should do this, or you should be this, or, how was life for you growing up as opposed to how life is now?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, my childhood was very dysfunctional. I lived with my mom. She had 6 kids, and we were very poor. Lots of drugs, domestic violence, all of the things. And I think self-abandonment and caregiver. Those are the two things that come to mind because she was out working or out with men, etc. And I kind of stepped up as the caretaker in the home.
Mm.
And there's such a gap. Like my oldest sister is 46 and my youngest brother is like 22, 3, 4, something like that. So there's like a large gap. And so I kind of was like the caregiver in the home, which is so interesting that I morph into service of others, right? I
Yeah.
joined the military, more service of others. And then now retired from there, I'm in this, holistic practice again, service of others. So that, brings back to that root of like self-abandonment. I was never taught as a child to take care of self, to nurture self. And also in the military, same thing. It was, I'm going to do this so I can be of for everyone else. And now where that's changed is I don't look at the self-care as, being selfish, and I make myself a priority, even if that means like my kids having to wait. I no longer feel guilt or shame around that. And so I move into this place of, service of self is just kind of where I'm at right now. And that was not something that was modeled to me as a child at all.
Yeah.
And then also the other piece to that is like my mom was always with someone. She has her own, abuse and abandonment wounds that she carries that she did not seek support around. And so I learned through watching her that my value was based on being accepted by a man. And so, as I share in my book, there's
Mm-hmm.
lots of stories around that. And I am, for the first time in my entire life, single. I'm not dating anyone. I don't, knock on wood, but I don't ever see myself on dating apps because it's a no for me. My body says so. Yeah, like I'm just being in this exploration of self and just really deep in the discovery. Like I spent these 2 years retired from the Navy, like learning about myself. I went from my parents telling me what to do to the Navy telling me what to do. And so having autonomy for the first time in my life to be able to choose for myself, I was in that self-discovery. So I learned like, I love writing. I love this. I love that. I also learned what I didn't love. Now, having, my spouse left in March, now it's like I get to do that even deeper refinement and reclaiming me, parts of me that I gave away and self-abandoned to make sure he was happy. So now I'm like, I like football, but I realized I don't love it to watch it 6 days a week like I used to.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is NFL season. And I'm like, who's playing tonight? Like it used to be a whole entire thing just last year. And so it's been real fun. It's been hard and challenging because I'm now, working through my anxious attachment style, which at a much, much, much deeper level than I really care to. But I know this is just opening expansion for me as well. And I'm teaching my boys, which is so important. I want these boys to be so rooted in self that they don't sway for a moment, that they can listen to their body and know like, this is a yes for me, this is a no for me. And there's a difference between compromising and then just, full on self-abandoning. So I think that's a huge difference than what my child was experience was to like where I'm kind of sitting right now. it's interesting because like before we started, so I opened my book, like I flipped through for my journal prompt this morning, which I shared in my IG stories, but I always, like when I've done these podcast interviews around my book, I flip to a page and I'm like, oh, okay, what maybe does somebody need to know, or what message do they need to hear? And it's it was interesting because what I opened up to, it's always this piece I'm navigating of like the body and the image I have of myself, because that's another thing in childhood. I've been shamed for my physical attributes ever since a kid. And part of why he left in March was because of him no longer being in love with me because of my weight gain and looking masculine. It's not your face, it's your body. Like that will forever be ingrained in my mind and will take some time for that rewiring process because it just reinforced so many other messages I received from men in my life, including father figures, to where it was just, he watered that seed of like, Candace, you're too big. You're this, you're that. And so when I opened up the book, I'm like, okay, I'll read this one little section if that's okay. Because I don't know if somebody else needs to hear this. So this little part's on page 184 of the book, the paperback, and it said, he was holding me to expectations and standards he was not willing to hold himself to. I was angry. I was crushed. How was this happening? I asked myself. I knew it. How did I not listen to my intuition all these years? I spent the evening staring at myself in the mirror, seeing exactly why he was not attracted to me, seeing all the flaws and imperfections, the scars, the stretch marks. I stared at myself in shame for not being pretty enough, for gaining all the weight, and not seeing what was right in front of me. I had been in denial for years, clinging to hope that things would improve, clinging to our potential, clinging to prayers he would eventually want to seek healing. And so, really, like, that is just a piece of me being in denial of the truth of where we were at, me being in denial of what I knew I needed to do to move forward, me gripping and holding on to the messaging from childhood and him that it's me. Because right when we can reinforce and water those seeds planted at childhood and whatever stages throughout our timeline, then it allows us to kind of sit in that victim of, and that's what I had found myself doing for a lot of years, sitting in that victim seat, that victim energy of, why does this keep happening? Why does this keep happening? Versus me stepping into that empowerment energy of, this doesn't feel aligned. This doesn't feel good and clean. And so instead of me being of service to self, stepping into my power, I allowed myself to sit in the victim energy and being of service of him and staying in a relationship that was no longer aligned, even when he's reinforcing all of these things of my looks and my body and all the things. So it's just that reminder of the self-abandonment, the self-betrayal, the self-sabotage, how us as women, we shift away from our own desires, even though it's like glaring. It's like, hello. We shift away from that just to be of service of others. And some of that is rooted in trauma, fear of being alone. Well, I'll stay with someone who's unhealthy and super toxic because it's better than being alone. So that just kind of like stamps what we were talking before of like, my love is validated based off of the love of someone else, even if it's not the best love like I deserve.
Gosh, that was so, so good because I mean, who can't relate? I don't know if there's anybody who can't relate to that. At one point in time, neglecting or not putting, how are the right words to say it? Yeah, giving your self-worth and things to other people or viewing it from another person's lens instead of your own for who you truly are. I mean, sometimes even with our children, like we can get caught up not just in a spouse, but in, we just get so lost in everything and being a wife or a husband if you're listening, or being a mother or whatever it is, being in our work. Like we just get so caught up in being everything for everyone else that we lose ourselves. We lose ourselves so much. And I've seen it so many times with so many women. Like, I don't know if there's anybody that can't relate to that. Like, it's, yeah.
I know. And, we end up putting on these masks as a way to self-protect because we want to be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, are we really genuinely being accepted
Mm.
wearing masks? Because they're not accepting us. They're
Right.
accepting the version of us that we're choosing to show
Yes.
them because
Yeah.
that's what feels safest in our system. And so that's what I have been doing is just unraveling and unpeeling all of these masks that have been like glued to my face since childhood. And there's just been more and more and more. And as I'm in this unraveling and in this, personal expansion, there's so much that's happened over the last couple of years, but even just the last 6 months, or actually, no, it's been longer than that. He left like in March, so we're like 8 months already, over 8 months that he's been gone. It's like I'm such a different person. And it's like it's so much has changed. And it's because I decided, like, okay. I mean, yes, he left. And also somebody had pointed out to me, they're like, Candace, you left years prior to that. The moment that you said, I'm reclaiming myself and I'm going to do the work is the moment that you two were no longer an energetic match because he won't work. He would not do it. He's in therapy now, which I'm so grateful. I'd go through it all again and I'd go through the heartache and the pain all over again, knowing that he's doing the work now. If I was his permission slip, okay, fine. Checkmate. Like I served my purpose, right? But during that time, like I was the one doing the work, stepping forward, and I became a different person. I looked at things differently. I viewed things differently. I spoke differently. My actions, I no longer wanted to drink. I no longer wanted
Mm.
to
Yeah.
do certain things. And that was like, what's going on with you? Well,
Mm.
evolving. And so I no longer became a match. So while he physically left, somebody's like, actually, you stepped aside years before and he was not willing to come along.
Mm.
So just a different, perspective of the
Uh,
situation.
because it is so important to have your spouse grow alongside you. I mean, my husband and I, we separated for 2.5 years because I think my husband had started going on this direction of like self-help, really opening his eyes to lots of different things. And I was like, you're crazy. I don't know what you're doing. And so we just weren't a match at that point. And it had to happen for where I am now. Like it all happens how it's meant to happen. Yeah. It's almost like giving that permission slip that it's okay. You don't have to, I think we talked about this on the summit and things too, but it's like you don't have to stay with family. You don't have to stay with friends and people who aren't aligned with you any longer, even though that's hard to say because especially if they've been
11 as you say this.
I love it. But it's like I think we feel like we're so stuck with especially our family, whether you're married, you're talking about a married family or the family of origin that you've grown up with. We're not always going to align with everything that they say, and it's okay. We don't have to stay stuck in where they are. We can grow and evolve, and we can set boundaries, like that boundary of like, hey, I love you and I can hang out with you, but it has to be like this, or you can't be doing this if I'm there, or I'm just going to leave. So it's like creating these boundaries, setting ourselves up for this is who I am, and really speaking your truth and knowing who you are. I think it really comes down to knowing who you are
Yeah. And
and
I
standing in your truth.
love that. And it's true, right? And so like when you don't know who you are, it's like, well, of course these relationships aren't going to work because they're not a true energetic match for who I am. And like at the end of the day, like I believe that everyone comes into our life for a reason, season, or a lifetime. And just with us, our season is over. And we both taught each other so much. All of my relationships, with the exception of him, they've all cheated on me in some way. There's been domestic, emotional, like all the things that you could think of. And in some ways we were nearing in the emotional, like abuse and neglect and so on and so forth. But like he showed me that not all men are going to be the same way. So that was a beautiful gift. Not
Mm-hmm.
all men are going to be dumpster dads. Like he is amazing. We co-parent very, very well. And I think I showed him how much, how important it is to do the work. So we aren't handing our kids a backpack full of trauma through our projections and how we raise them, because now he's just like so open to it and he's in his therapy and he's like, oh my God. The thing is he always compared his life experiences to mine, and mine are pretty brutal. And so what he did was minimized his lived experiences because he was so busy comparing his to mine. And I would tell him all the time, you can't do that. Like everybody's so different. You can't just say you didn't have trauma because you didn't have this happen to you or that happen to you. Trauma is still trauma. All it is something that happens too much, too fast, too soon, or your body didn't get to complete an experience that your body didn't get to complete and is kind of holding on to, just kind of running amok internally. And so we definitely served our purpose
Yeah.
for one another. Yeah, I'm not mad about it. I mean, I was, but
Yeah.
I was.
But you've done the work to heal yourself, to
Yeah,
heal it.
and
Yeah.
it's launching me into like this book would not have been what
Mhm.
it was
Yeah.
had he not left. It wouldn't have been what it was. So I'm grateful for that. And also it's allowing me to really work through my body image stuff because, you know, to hear someone say I'm not attracted to you anymore, it's your weight gain, you're too masculine in appearance, like to hear those things, it's like, you know what I mean? Like there's so many rebuttals that come to mind that like I just want to like, you know, fire back on. But at the end of the day, I know a lot of it too was his own insecurity with self and him projecting how he felt of himself onto me because like that's the easy thing to do, right? And so it's allowed me though to see where and how much my body image had still been affected and how much I hadn't healed, which led me into my media production experience in the summer where I did my big full nude photo shoot and video shoot that I sprinkle all over my IGs, not to be grotesque, but I look at it as a form of art and that beauty is comes in all forms, shapes, and sizes. And we need to appreciate our sacred vessel and all it carries for us. Because when I go through my book, I'm like, oh my gosh, how could I ever feel grossness towards this vessel, like everything that it's been carrying all these years? Of course, I had a pelvic organ prolapse. Like, it's like, sister, you're sacral. Like, it can only hold and store so much. Like, we're trying to support it. And there's just so many things where it's, yeah.
Yeah. And so for the viewers that don't know that you did a nude, I don't think I knew that it was fully nude.
Girl,
You
I was
know?
naked in front of women I did not even know. Yes, it was. I mean, I knew them through our calls and through
Sure.
planning and organizing, but I'd never been in person with them. And I'm sitting here, boobs flopping all over the place, lying across the floor, got my boob in my armpit here on the side. And they're like, hey, pick that up and let's move that. It was an experience. But again, the somatic and embodiment work allowed me to hold myself through it. There's just stepping on the plane, I was getting a visceral reaction in my body. I felt my heart increasing, my breath. I'm like, what's happening? You get on planes all the time. I'm like, yeah, because once I get on this plane and I land in Colorado, it's all because I go all in. Like
Yeah.
when I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And so I knew stepping on that plane was I'm doing it.
Mm.
There's no turning back. And so, yeah, that was actually day one of our shoot. Yeah. I mean, we got started and I'm like, I'm just like taking off all my clothes right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I have two questions with that. So the first one is I want to get into what you're doing now. So we'll end with that. But the first question I have is so you've got teenage boys. This is my fear and things too, with like stepping
Uh-huh.
out as this version of myself and wanting to go deeper into the sensuality and the sexuality work and, really feeling into my true essence. I would love to hear your take, your thoughts on all of it, doing this nude shoot and having teenage boys and having social media and putting what you put out on there. For me, too, I have my son's like 3 or 4 of his really good friends follow me on my Instagram. So I'm like, anything that I put out there, they're going to see, you know? So I would love to hear like how was that process for you knowing like okay my kids might see this and I'm gonna
I
do it.
didn't consider that. I didn't think about that because at the time, like my daughter, she's got social media, like this is what she does. She's got her degree in entrepreneurship, social media marketing. So like, I don't care. I knew she'd be all about, yeah, mom, yes, sis, go, you go. My youngest son doesn't have social media. He's 13. And then my middle one just got at the end of September, just got the Instagram and the Snapchat and the TikTok the end of September. I wasn't even thinking about it because I'm so used to them not having it. And then all of a sudden I post one day like my docu clips promoting my book and there's like these full like new I mean I have a sheet on so like you can't see like otherwise I'd get flagged. So there is like, some sheet coverage or my hand placements will be in a way to cover up like, the nurples and the hoo-ha and stuff like that. But I wasn't even thinking about it. One day I posted the one where I'm laying on my side and it's like you see it all almost. And then I was going through my IG stories because I was commenting back on someone that reacted and made a comment or whatever. And I saw my son saw it and I'm like, shoot, that's right. He's got social media. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to be ashamed. Like, this is about women empowerment. My boys need to see I am not embarrassed of my physical body. I am not embarrassed of what I look like. They know what dad said to me. They know. And also, they need to see that that's not going to make me hide. His opinion of how I look is not going to make me retreat. It's not, if anything, it's going to just, put me out there in a way to help empower women even more that our bodies are beautiful. And so, I asked him one time, I'm like, hey, I forgot you had social media. Sorry about that. And he's like, it's fine, mom. And I'm like, well, none of your friends follow me. He goes, well, not yet. They're trying to find you. I'm like, well, good thing our names are not the same, and then they were wanting to like find my book and read my book, which, like, please don't do that either. But I mean, I look at it as when I get the nudge and I get the pull to do something, like I do it. And I'm not insensitive to them, but also it's like we have to change how women's bodies are looked at. I'll be the walking permission slip. I'll blast myself along with other women who do that already. But yeah, like I don't know. I just do it.
And it's fully just stepping into who you are and owning that. And I think that's the beautiful piece about it.
Art is it's not, it's art. All of that is art in a form of itself.
I love that. So tell the listeners what you do now, because you talked about holistic coaching and things like that. So tell them what you do now, where they can find you, all of that good stuff.
Yeah. So I'm really been working with women that are also self-abandoning is what seems to be the theme. I have, a few different like programs that are out there. One is for the creatives. So those that are, maybe you're an artist or a dancer or a writer and you've got these blocks that you're struggling to birth this beautiful thing. So I've got a 3-month program specifically for artists and creatives. And then I'm actually getting ready to launch my year-long mastermind called Body Reboot. It's for women, a retreat included. And this is all about like really digging in. This is for the woman that like keeps cycling the same patterns and the same themes over and over and over again, no matter how many times she says, I'm going to do this year. We all have these resolutions, these words, these things, but they get to a point and they get stuck and then they revert back. So I'm opening that up. I think it's this week actually, where I'm going to be taking on women for a year to really help them evolve, reclaim, rewire, and reprogram. Yeah. And my Instagram is Candace_West or retired_Navy_nurse. And that's how you can find me on the socials.
I'll put that all in the show notes too, so that everybody can find you that way. And then do you have, I forget if you have a website.
I do. It's www.candicewest.com. So there's some freebies there as well.
I don't know if you gave me your link to your book, but could you, I think, yes, I think actually you did on the summit.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm going to put your book link in there as well. So if anybody wants to get your book, I'm excited to, I have ordered it. It has probably come and I just haven't gotten it. I'm terrible at like getting my mail, and actually my kids used to get it from our mailbox is like way down, and they used to get it when they got off the bus. And now everybody drives and so for the last year, I have not gotten myself in a good system of getting my mail and my
I'm the same way. Like somebody will be like, hey, I sent you this. Oh, I haven't checked my mail in weeks. Hold on.
It was like a whole week from my birthday when I got my mom's birthday card. I'm like, hey, so sorry you sent me a card. I just got it. And she's like, oh, I sent that so long ago. I'm like, yeah, it's my fault. I just didn't check my mail. So
I am the same.
But I'm excited because next week we're going to be on vacation. So I'm going to read your book while I'm on vacation. So I'm excited about that. So
thank you.
So thank you so much for being here. Is there anything that you'd like to send off with? Any parting wisdom, anything that you want to end with? Or we can just
like, no, just permission granted for whatever, like fill in the freaking blank. Like we get one time on Earth School. Why are we not living a F yes life? And it starts with service of self. So permission granted. Go do it. Go do it. Go do it.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you loved listening as much as I loved recording. Each and every conversation that I have here on this podcast just lights my soul on fire. I love having conversations where we explore and challenge our ways of thinking. So if you've resonated with anything here and you're looking for more, please connect with me on Facebook in my Soul Deep community group, which is free. I'm also offering all my listeners a free month in my Soul Deep Connection membership. I have poured my heart and soul into this membership, bringing you resources to help you grow into the best and truest version of yourself. I've used my knowledge and experience as a nurse, combined with my knowledge and experience as a coach, breathwork facilitator, and somatic embodiment guide. This library consists of breathwork, kriyas, and other resources and modalities that will help you learn about and give you the healing tools to live the life you've been dreaming about, and to help you find your true passion and zest for life again. This library of resources is vital for everyday maintenance. And on top of the library of resources, there are live monthly calls, ranging from breathwork, kundalini, full moon or new moon circles, as well as guest speakers on a variety of different topics, from decluttering to marketing to sisterhood and all things healing and wellness. So make sure you join today to get you back on track to living that thriving life that you are longing for. Remember, the first month is free, and my hope is that you find so much value that staying is an absolute no-brainer. It really is everything that I was looking for as I started my journey, and so much more. I truly hope to see you inside my community. And if you haven't yet, please follow me here and on social. Like and subscribe, and make sure to share your favorite episode with your friends and community. And when you do, make sure to tag me in that post. If you tag me, you'll be entered into a drawing for that month where you can win a free one-to-one session, breathwork or coaching session with me. All the links will be in the show notes here below. Until next time, Soul Deep fam, and in the words of my dear friend Mary Lacey Banks, I'm holding you so tight in a thought hug.